Hey everyone, my name is Fahim Hassan, and I'm going to be doing my presentation on VR esports and understanding competitive players' perceptions of location-based VR esports. So, the purpose of this study was to find the unique player experience linked to VR esports. This means that they were taking more of a mental angle to find out how the players felt about VR esports. Previous studies in this field have been more focused on comparing VR games to traditional games, and as well as the more physical aspect of VR esports, or well, just VR games in general, rather than the mental aspect. For example, something listed in the study was extra games. This is a combination of the word exercise and games, and most studies in the VR field were more so focused on the physical exercise aspect of VR games, unlike this study which aimed to find the more mental aspects. So, key questions here were: what are the competitive esports players' attitudes towards VR esports? How do competitive esports players experience VR esports? And what are the perceived barriers to entry to VR esports? And keywords here are player experience, PX, immersion, and embodiment. We'll see that immersion is a huge theme throughout the entire study, as it really, as higher levels of immersion really lock in a player's experience to the game. So, how did the authors test their hypothesis? They performed their study in three phases. Phase 1 was a preliminary interview to assess the attitudes towards VR and VR esports. Phase 2 was a first hand VR session with the participants at a gaming cafe. And then Phase 3 was a post session interview with all the participants to assess how they felt about the game they just played and what their experiences were. Something important to note here is that they didn't really explain the specific questions they had, they just kind of went over a general overview of them. A little more about the methodology. The study was made up of 8 university students from the eSports club, and 7 of them were male, 1 was female. And it's important to note that they were from the eSports club because this means that they had a background in competitive gaming. The specific game they had a background in was CSGO, which is an FPS, similar to the game they played in this study, which was Soul Raiders. The gameplay is pictured right at the right, and they played this at the Zero Latency Gaming Cafe, like I just said. So, what were the major findings of this study? So, as you can see, there are a lot of findings. There were 9 total themes, so I'm just going to try to go over a brief overview of them. So, in the preliminary interview themes, the players were given a video of people playing the VR game, and after that, they were asked some questions, and this is how they found the themes of their answers. So the first was physical embodiment and health. So through watching the video, the players assumed that the physical nature of VR esports would be a big positive because, it keeps you active and it's like a new layer of immersion. And that ties into our second theme, which was immersion and interactivity. Because of the physicality of it, and because you have a VR headset strapped to your head, the players thought that the games would probably be more immersive than traditional esports. So they thought that the immersion aspect was also a plus. And then the audience is spectating. Audience is spectating was actually more mixed than positive. So because of how VR games are, you just kind of see someone moving around in space. They thought that maybe the audience factor would be a little silly. People would think that it would look a little clownish. So they were kind of mixed on that. And then skills and strategies, they saw this as a plus because, like I said, with the physical aspect and the immersion aspect, they thought that having to immerse yourself in the game more and having to use your physical prowess, it would give like a fourth dimension to the game, which would increase the amount of skills and strategies you needed to use. And then with technology and accessibility, sorry for the stuttering, they thought that this was also a plus overall because the technology of VR is very advanced, right? So they were looking forward to how advanced technology could really be in this field. One issue they did have was possibly that the VR headsets would be too big or just not really accessible to play a real game in, but otherwise they were pretty positive about how technology could be used in this regard. Then after phase 2, we would go to the post-interview for the participants, and here they found 4 more themes. The first one was immersion. Like last time, immersion was seen as a plus because of the physicality of it. They could really immerse themselves in the game and they could really just delve deep into it. And then next was comparison to traditional esports. So with this theme, they noted that VR esports was definitely very different to traditional esports. Whereas with traditional esports, you just kind of sit at your desk and just play the game. Because of the physicality in VR esports, it's a whole different field. Like I was saying last time with the skills and strategies, there's like a fourth dimension to this, and the players recognize this. So you have to treat it very differently. Then with arena setup and systems, this was seen as kind of mixed as well, because they noted that when you're in a big room of space just playing around, it's hard to feel as immersed as you would in like a real map, right? So some of the prop designs and some of the map setups were kind of affected by the arena setup and systems. Then the last theme here was equipment and technology, and this was overall seen as a plus. The headsets were lightweight, the backpacks were lightweight, they could move around freely, so they saw that this technology was very very advanced and very good, and it felt good to play around with. So are these results reliable and accurate? And are there any possible limitations? So I would say that these results are probably reliable in that these are true feelings from players. I say this because this isn't a quantitative study. There isn't hard data that they can really use, so it's kind of just word of mouth. However, these players are active members of the competitive community, and they seem genuinely interested in this study, so I would say that yes, these are probably their true feelings, and so these results are probably reliable. Some caveats, however, are that because they're not top esports competitors, they're just regular casual players, their results and their feelings might not mirror higher level players. Also, their results might be skewed because of the gender gap. As you can see, there were 7 males and 1 female, so that difference in perception might skew the results. Another issue was the unserious nature of the study. Like I was saying, these aren't top esports competitors, they're just casual players, and they felt that because there was no pride at stake or anything, that they didn't take the game as serious, and not taking the game as serious could have affected their results and their feelings. And there are also some technological limitations such as lag. In the second session of their VR gameplay, they found that there were some connectivity issues in the gaming cafe, which of course impacted their feelings towards the game as they weren't able to play the game as properly as they could have. So what would Kling think of this? So for this, I chose 2 quotes. They're kind of based around the same idea, but I thought these 2 were good to choose. I won't read them verbatim, but the first one was about the contextual inquiry. This is basically about how the context of everything around the technology really influences how we use it and what we think about it. The example he uses here is the web. So people say that the web enables us to get better information, but what does that really mean? What is this information that's being found? Who is this information being found for? Why is this information being found? Why is it better? So the social so we need context socially to understand why the technology is useful. And similarly, in the second quote, they talk about the social context, and this is pretty much just kind of the same thing. The social context around technology plays a big role in influencing how we use and see these technologies. So that being understood, I would say that this study does fit into Kling's research, and the contextual inquiry is key here. The VR study does recognize that there are different things surrounding VR, there's different things surrounding the context of VR that influence its ability to spread throughout society. They don't solely focus on the technology. For example, they talk about accessibility issues and how physical attributes or disabilities might affect people from participating in VR esports. Or they talk about the pricing issues. Some people might not have the funds to play VR games that regularly. Or with spatial issues. If you have to go to a gaming cafe all the time, that might not be reasonable for someone. It might not be feasible for them. So there are bigger social aspects involved around the technology, which is why this study does fit into the contextual inquiry aspect of Kling's research. And similarly, the social context is key as well. The study recognizes VR's relationship with the social world, and how that affects its development. For example, they recognize that VR esports is not really that popular, and they recognize that, so that it's important to understand that if we get the word out about VR esports more, then more people will know about it, and that would affect its development time as more people would want to develop better systems for VR esports. Another example is the audience theme that I mentioned earlier. Because people might see VR esports as kind of clownish and kind of silly to look at, it might affect people's relationship with VR, as they wouldn't want to play something so silly when you're supposed to take it serious, right? So those were just like some examples about how this study does fit into Kling's research through the contextual inquiry and the social context ideas. So yeah, that's pretty much this study. Thank you for watching.